Hi, I'm Jennifer Neal, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about what makes a product engaging, how you can apply cognitive science research to your UI and video games. So more and more studies on cognition are converging on this idea that meaning is created because of action. The world is full of what we call affordances, or opportunities for action. So a chair is meaningful because it affords you the opportunity to sit on it. You don't usually need to differentiate one pile of wood from another pile of wood because they have the same affordances to you. But if it's chair-shaped, suddenly it has a different meaning. So therefore, even down to the simplest organism, we find that animals are really pattern recognition machines. This is why AI developers are so intent on neural networks. Networks of nodes with activation thresholds perform a lot like brains, both literally and functionally, extracting signals from noise. The simplest three-layer feed-forward network is terrible at logical operations that a computer finds easy, but it's great at classification tasks and predictions. If you add recurrent connections from the output to the input, you can suddenly create associative memory. If you build a layer of nodes that inhibit one another competitively, they self-organize to perform clustering tasks incredibly well. Neural networks will also show cool things like progressive differentiation during learning, an ability to adapt for new inputs or functions. We call that plasticity. And they also show graceful degradation. But the point is, the environment acts on us, and in return we act on the environment. But this agent-environment interaction is so close you actually can't decouple it. Our very perception of the world is defined by affordances. If you tell someone to watch a video clip of a street scene, they won't notice when a blue car turns red because they're not expecting that kind of change. If you tell someone to watch a video of people playing basketball and you tell them, count the number of times the ball bounces, they're not going to notice when a gorilla walks on and does a dance halfway through. They don't notice because it's not relevant to counting the number of times the basketball bounces. This coupling between you and the affordances of your environment is so close that you can actually see affordances mapped in your brain. So for example, the same way certain parts of your brain activate when you use certain parts of your body, if you get used to using a certain tool, you'll actually see the tool being mapped in your brain in a similar way. Scientists have seen this in monkeys who learn to use rakes and pliers. So meanwhile, you've been asking, what does cause engagement then? What is it about a brain that will make someone want to keep clicking through my website or playing the next level of my game? Spoilers, it has to do with offering affordances. Now, I had the good fortune to get to do some fun research at Notre Dame's Emotive Computing Lab on user engagement while reading on a computer. We had a fancy camera that could detect exactly where on the screen your eyes were fixating, and we also gave people tests before and after so we could measure what they had learned. As you'd expect, people who look at the screen closely also tend to remember what they read and demonstrate comprehension. Studies like ours have made some key findings that make sense when you think about affordances. People are more engaged, one, when their actions have an impact on their environment, so they feel more closely coupled with the tool. But two, people are more engaged by novelty and difficulty. When something isn't easy and doesn't conform to expected patterns, people have to pay more attention. The very cool thing is that when people are confused in this way, you also see their learning gains increase. So, in games, developers often talk about flow and juice. Flow is that addictive zen state when you're so engaged that you can lose track of time. Lots of games are created with the goal of maximizing time in flow, whether that's by minimizing interruptions or finding that sweet spot in your difficulty setting that's not too hard and not too easy. Making a game juicy is about making it respond to the player's actions so that affordances in the world are magnified. In a shooting game, you want to make the user feel powerful, so you make them a little unrealistically fast, you make the bullets larger, you add recoil to the gun and camera animations. In a Nintendo game, things maybe make cute noises when you touch them and squish cartoonishly to emphasize the effect you have on them. In a horror game, you might have almost no sound at all except for the user's footsteps, and when danger is near, so the user has to listen very, very closely. On a website, you'll see a selected tab not only become highlighted, but it might also deform slightly with an animation or bounce up or whatever gratuitous thing that you want to add. So you also see these kinds of juicy responses in things like combos, streaks, points, leaderboards, and achievements. When your product responds to the user's every action with an amplified but tailored reaction, People become invested in exploring all of your product's affordances. Poking a rock repeatedly is boring, but poking a phone repeatedly can be exciting. Studies have shown this kind of gamification really does increase engagement in measures of coming back for more and in measurements like comprehension tests. People like to make a lot of fuss about the importance of finding the right level of difficulty to engage the user, but some studies are showing that elements like choice, novelty, and suspense are potentially better for creating engagement. Difficulty is maybe not so vital as the suspense or confusion created by very narrowly winning or losing. If your product is telling a story, and really everything is, whether it's about using powers to save a princess or using an app to conveniently sell a bike, then you need to create user agency in that story. The problem with creating user agency by adding juice is that if you're adding a dozen reactions for every user action, that adds up to a lot of development work for you really quickly. So if you're telling a story in a game, for example, you might be tempted to create a new story branch for every user choice. In narrative design, this is called a time cave, after the Choose Your Own Adventure book with that name. Alternatively, if you're a clever developer, you'll probably find ways to respond to user actions in a more constrained way, maybe by storing variables that influence specific outcomes, or by using sets of choices that diverge and then come back to a linear storyline. Or if you're feeling ambitious, you might find a way to automate delivery of small pieces of story, such that player choices affect probabilities of receiving particular bits of story next. Our users' brains are really a gift. In the same way that they'll ignore a dancing gorilla to count basketball bounces and look ahead for expected patterns, they're going to fill in the blanks and extrapolate their own stories. The trick is to find ways to reward your users so that you become a springboard for their imagination. So go out there and make some juicy apps and games. Good luck, guys.